and welcome to Sunday Morning Zen, a program of Zen Life and Meditation Center here in sunny Oak Park. We're happy you could join us this morning. Looks like Roshi's conducting. So this morning's speaker is Shuso Diane Myogetsu Bejcek, and she's been practicing and studying Buddhism, in particular Zen Buddhism, for many years. She's an ordained Zen Buddhist priest here at the center and a clinical psychologist working with children and families. She co-facilitates the Open Heart Circle with Jackie, and she's a past member of ZLMC's board of directors. She's also this year's Shuso, our practice leader. And she's been doing a wonderful, wonderful job. I've gotten nothing but unbelievable feedback. A lot of people have been touched by your practice. So thank you very much for all you're putting into it. And today she'll be talking to us about everyday Zen. There you go.
Thank you, Shika. Welcome, everybody. So nice to see everyone online and in person, and to reacquaint with old friends. So it's very, very precious. So I need to amend the title a little bit. Everyday Zen, when Sensei asked if I would teach today, and she asked for a title, I said, I don't know what I'm teaching on, but Everyday Zen sounds good. So let's use that title. But actually, it is about everyday Zen, but it's also about appreciating the basics and getting back to basics. And we all know that when we want to improve a skill, when we want to study something, if we've participated in sports on any level, learned any new skill or hobby, we're taught the basics, right? That's the foundation of that particular activity. And so I felt it was important during this time of Ango, which is an intensive practice period, to go back to the basics and to really appreciate what that means. Because I think sometimes the longer we practice, you know, we're sort of looking forward, looking to see what's new and shiny and what has an allure to us. And quite honestly, going back to the basics is stabilizing. It centers us, we refocus, we recommit. So I think it's extremely important. Benji, they're not showing, the participants aren't showing up. Did they disappear?
No,
Okay. There, Sensei's got it. Technology issues, sorry. So during this period of Ango, it's meant to be an intensive practice period. And all of us that are in Ango, I think there's about 21 or 22 of us, have made a commitment to deepen our practice, have made a commitment, whatever that means to each of us, have made a commitment to go further, push a little bit more, take a little bit of a deeper plunge. And so in Ango, we've been studying, we've got a study class that meets every other week, and we've been studying the Tibetan teachings on Lojong, which is a teaching to help us train our mind, which is a teaching to help us open our heart and to transform adversity and crises and difficulties into the path of our practice. And so I was struck by, there's 59 slogans, 7 points, 59 slogans, and we've been methodically going through it in our Ango study class. But I was struck by something last week, and that was one of the points in transforming adverse conditions into the path. One of the slogans is about being grateful to everyone. So let that sink in for a minute. Being grateful to everyone. And the subheading on being grateful to everyone is meditating on the great kindness that we receive. So it's easy to be grateful, isn't it? When someone that you know or love shows you or extends a kindness. and we feel something in our heart, something warm, something precious, because we've been given a kindness and we're very grateful. It's almost as if receiving that kindness and gratitude go hand in hand. Very, very easy to do when it's someone that we love, when it's someone, it doesn't even have to be anyone that we know. It could be, you've got a limited amount of time and you're pulling into Whole Foods parking lot, there's no parking spaces, and somebody waves you ahead of them to take the, primo spot. So you don't know that person, but they've given you a kindness, and maybe you have a little bit of a feeling of, thank you, I appreciate that. That's meaningful to me. That touches my heart. So I want to explore this a little bit as it relates to the kindnesses of our ancestors. So what I want to do today is to primarily draw on two of our ancestors, Suzuki Roshi and Dogen Zenji. So this book, if you have not read Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, if you haven't read it in a while, I encourage you to pick it back up and use it as your training text. Use it as reacquainting yourself with the basics of practice. So I'll give you a little bit more history of Suzuki Roshi, but there's just 3 parts to this book. He starts with right practice, goes into right attitude, and has right understanding. We're going to look at right practice today because it's foundational. It's the first core set of teachings that Suzuki Roshi brings to us to strengthen our practice, to inspire us. So one of the ways that we can increase our gratitude and meditate on the great kindness is to appreciate what's come before us. We're sitting here through the kindness of others, aren't we? We're receiving teachings through the kindness of others. Our practice is through the kindness of others. All the ways in which we have transformed our heart and our mind is through the kindness of others. So the book starts off, and the translator said there are 2 Suzukis, and I think it's really important, as you know, I've spoken before about lineage and ancestors. Extremely important for us to feel that we are a part of the lineage. Right now, we are part of the living lineage of Buddhist ancestors, Zen teachers, instructors, Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. We are part of that lineage. And if we just let that sink in a little bit, it's hard not to feel some gratitude that we're not an independent island that is stumbling towards enlightenment, whatever that means, in whatever shape or form. We're dependent on ancestors, on the lineage, on teachers. So the 2 Suzukis, you might be aware of D.T. Suzuki, who was really seen as the pioneer of bringing Japanese Soto Zen to the West. And then 50 years later, Suzuki Roshi, 1959, came to the US and founded Tassajara Zen Center and founded the San Francisco Zen Center. And D.T. Suzuki's teachings were often seen as very dramatic, maybe even had some scholarly flair to them. Whereas Shunryu Suzuki Roshi's teachings were seen as very ordinary. I had a conversation with our abbot, Roshi, and he had met Suzuki Roshi in his early Zen studies and practice. And he said, Suzuki Roshi, very down to earth, very practical. So this book is actually a compilation of his informal talks that he gave when he was out in the West at Los Gatos and at San Francisco Zen Center. And I thought, what better way to bring us back to the basics than to actually share some of the passages that I found to be incredibly inspiring and nurturing for our Zen practice. So here's a fact that I didn't know, and I was blown away by this. Suzuki Roshi received transmission at the age of 22. But there's hope for us all. So Suzuki Roshi's teachings is about Zen mind. Not what we would think of as our ordinary mind or our personal mind, but about Zen mind. And in the introduction to Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, the translator says, Zen mind is one of those enigmatic phrases used by Zen teachers to make you notice yourself, to go beyond the words and wonder what your own mind and being are. So we've talked about this, that part of our practice is to try to touch the true nature of reality, of self, of what we consider to be other. So Zen mind is this, I say idea for lack of a better word, is this idea that it is the purpose of all Zen teachings to bring us to the place that we know our mind and know ourself and know our reality, the true nature of that. And I love this phrase. The purpose of all Zen teaching is to make you wonder. Is to make you wonder. And to answer that wondering with the deepest expression of your own nature. Isn't that amazing? To make you wonder. How many times do we wonder, do we sit in awe at something? So the purpose of Zen practice, I just find this lovely. It's to make us wonder and then answer that wondering with the direct expression of our true nature. So remember, the practice of meditating on the kindness of others and developing gratitude also naturally results in an outflow of a wish to repay that kindness, right? If someone is consistently kind to you and consistently offering you material, physical, emotional, psychological things, don't you at some point feel like, wow, I want to give something back? So what do we give back? We give back our Zen practice. Yeah, we can drop a few bucks in the Dana bowl. That's always helpful. But it's to give back our practice, to repay the kindness of all the teachers and ancestors that have come before us, who are teaching, sharing tremendous generosity. Suzuki Roshi came to the US completely separated from his culture, from his language, from the familiarity of being in Japan, from his own teachers and studies. But that generosity opened the door for all of us in the West. No matter the lineage, no matter the practices, the studies. So repaying that kindness is using the wonder of Zen practice, those moments that we have when we're sitting, when we're studying, when we're reading, where something starts to feel like it's been activated inside our heart. And we feel, wow. Have you ever had that feeling when you've been reading or sitting or studying, or you've heard a teaching and you think, wow, that's amazing. That's our wonder. And so how do we repay that? We express it in our practice, our vows, our commitments, our precepts, participating in ritual, participating in Ango, whatever we can do at our capacity. There's no right or wrong way. It has to come from deep inside. I can tell right now I'm not going to get through all this. Sorry, I'm gonna apologize up front. So the Suzuki Roshi says, the practice of Zen mind is beginner's mind. This is striking to me because there are times when I have heard teachings over and over again, and there's a little point at which you might shut off, right? Because you think, oh, I've heard that. Oh, I even know that. Or I could teach that, right? So Zen mind, beginner's mind is saying, take a breath and come back to the place of not knowing. Open your heart and open your mind and listen from the heart. Suspend what you think you know, what you don't know, what you'd like to know, because it's not a competition. Suzuki Roshi said, our practice should never be in competition with someone else's practice. One of his quotes said, that's the shabbiest practice of all, if you feel some competition with others. Make it yours. We've been talking about this in Ango, to liven the teachings so that you feel them in your heart, so that you're not just aware of the concepts and the intellectualization of them, but that you're aware of what it stirs in your heart, and then how it impels you to act in ways that reverse our self-centered, self-focused, unskillful habits of body, speech, and mind. But we can't do that without relying again and again and again on beginner's mind, the state of not knowing. So here's a description of beginner's mind, in case you're wondering. The mind of the beginner is empty, free of the habits of the expert, ready to accept, ready to doubt, and open to all possibilities. It is the kind of mind which can see things as they are, which step by step and in a flash can realize the original nature of everything. So if we let that sink in, step by step, when we cultivate beginner's mind, and the deeper that practice becomes for us, step by step and in a flash, we have the possibility of realizing the true nature of everything. Through our cultivation and dedication and commitment to beginner's mind. It's humbling, isn't it? It's really humbling. And beginner's mind was a favorite expression of Dogen Zenji's. And Dogen said, we must be teachable. Not knowing, wrap yourself in the Dharma and let the Dharma wrap itself around you. We must be teachable. So I think that's a question for us to ask, to try to figure out, in what ways am I open to the teachings? In what ways do I shut down? In what ways do it's not saying don't doubt. That's useful to us to deepen our understanding. But Dogen's saying we must be teachable in order to have the teachings reach a deeper place in our heart, to actualize the teachings. So I want to start with right practice, because that's sort of the foundation that Suzuki Roshi gave us. And we know what right practice means. We've taken precepts, we've taken vows, we understand the 6 perfections, the 6 paramitas. It keeps us pointed towards wholesome deeds, skillful actions of body, speech, and mind. So that's a form of right practice, isn't it? We're reversing our habitual tendencies to focus on ourselves, focus on the mundane, deny the teachings of true nature and true reality. So Suzuki Roshi is saying, in the beginner's mind, you've all heard this one. This is probably a bumper sticker. In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, but in the experts, there are few. So when we come at our practice, our study, sitting with some sense of this is it, I know this, we are limiting possibility. We are limiting potentiality. We're limiting it because when we know something, we close off to maybe that word or that phrase or that feeling that's going to open another level of possibility for us. That's why the 3 tenets of the Zen peacemakers, the first one of not knowing, is profound. So hard to approach that place of not knowing. I had read this one teaching from a Theravadan priest who said, every time something appears to his senses, he gets a thought, he follows it up with, not sure. He gets a feeling, not sure. In other words, challenging self to the reality that's appearing, which we know is not true nature, is not true reality. So Suzuki Roshi said, people say that practicing Zen is difficult, but there's a misunderstanding as to why. He said, it's not difficult because it's hard to sit in cross-legged position or to attain enlightenment. Okay. It's difficult because it is hard to keep our mind pure and our practice pure in its most fundamental sense. So we think, wow, I can't sit cross-legged anymore. And oh gosh, my back hurts when I sit too long in the chair. That's not the difficult part, is what Suzuki Roshi is saying. He's even saying, and it's not that difficult to attain enlightenment. The place that it is challenging for us is keeping our mind pure, is recalling the precepts, recalling the vows, recalling the 6 perfections, recalling the 4 noble truths, the 8 worldly concerns, on and on and on. There are 84,000 different teachings. One of them is going to settle in, right? If we open our heart. So I found that so encouraging. It's really up to us, right? It's taking the responsibility to check in with ourselves. Not whether you're sitting perfectly on the cushion. Sometimes when I see people sitting perfectly cross-legged, I have so much admiration. And I think, oh, that's just beautiful. That posture is so right on. That's so beautiful. I can't do that anymore. I can't sit on the cushion anymore. But then I'm reminded, but it's taking the responsibility for what's occurring in our heart. Have we whittled away at the delusions and unskillful nature of our speech, of our actions? Do we keep in mind that we have a precious human life right now and we are going to die? And suffering's all around us. And whatever actions we engage in have consequences, no matter how big or small. Do we keep those thoughts in mind so that it moves us to the place of check in with your mind. Gee, that wasn't so pure. Gee, a teacher one time said, what would it be like if all your thoughts could be broadcast out? Yikes, right? Yikes. So the question, Suzuki Roshi says, the goal of practice is always to keep our beginner's mind, always. He says, suppose you recite the Prajnaparamita Sutra only once. He said it might be a very good recitation. But what would happen to you if you recite it twice, 4 times, 10 times? At what place does it start to feel rote, mechanical? It doesn't really touch our heart anymore. So he says, when we lose beginner's mind, we start to lose our original attitude toward that practice. So think back to what felt like an original attitude when you first walked into a Dharma center, when you heard a teaching, when you studied, when you received something that felt quite profound. What was the attitude that you had? Was it exciting? Was it profound? Was it nurturing? Was it inspiring? So those are sort of the consequences of beginner's mind, right? Playful, joyful, we come out with wonder. We can hardly wait to tell our significant others, our neighbors, our friends, oh, you've got to come into the Dharma Center, you've got to come into the Zen Life Center. But then at what point, through that repetition, does it start to lose its luster? And it's not losing its luster from the side of the object, folks. It's losing it within our heart because we've lost beginner's mind. We started to move into the realm of expert. Maybe if we're not even saying those words, we're still like, racing in. We can recite Prajnaparamita Sutra. Maybe we have it memorized. Maybe recite the mantras. I love mantra recitation. And one of the ways that I'm reminded is when I'm reciting mantras, as soon as other things sort of clutter my mind and I think, you lost it, Myogetsu, that's gone. Now, it's still a nice activity, but Suzuki Roshi is saying the goal of practice is to always keep this beginner's mind. Because he says, if we lose that original attitude, that's going to happen in all of our other practices. It doesn't just happen because, I'm not really a fan of recitation, but I like to study. Or I'd rather hear the teaching. In all the practices, Suzuki Roshi is saying, we will lose our original attitude of joy, of wonder, of awe, of inspiration, and of the wish to repay the kindness by benefiting others. Whether we benefit formally through helping out, through service, through teaching, or whether we benefit our world, our community, our friends, our family. So here Suzuki Roshi gives us some profound thoughts about what beginner's mind feels like, what we can notice when we're holding beginner's mind. He says, in the beginner's mind, there is no thought, I have attained something. He says, all self-centered thoughts limit our vast mind. We could stop there and unpack that for the rest of the time. We could stop and really unpack that for the rest of the time, because there's no thought, I have attained something, right? And anytime we're looking at something that we think we did or want to do, or that self-preoccupation arises, he says, that's limiting. That's closing us down. That's moving us away from the true meaning of the teaching. It's losing beginner's mind. It's losing original attitude. When we have no thought of achievement, no thought of self, we are true beginners. That's amazing, isn't it? Do you see yourself as a beginner? This humbled me. I thought, wow, I'm not even a beginner yet. I'm pre-K. I'm not even a beginner yet. I can't say that I don't have no thought of achievement, no thought of self. So Suzuki Roshi is saying that's when you're a true beginner. But how kind, because we can check this. We can check this when we're sitting. We can check this when we're receiving teachings. We can check this when we're studying, practicing. If those thoughts creep in, oh, that was a good sit. I feel all chilled now. Okay, contradictory. So it brings us back to the place that we're really trying to keep beginner's mind, because he says beginner's mind is the mind of compassion. And when our mind is compassionate, it is boundless. Haven't you often wondered what unobservable compassion means? Avalokiteshvara, Buddha of compassion, has unobservable compassion, boundless, never tired, never lacking for generosity of spirit, of resources, of love. That's available to us as we open our hearts and our mind, as we reconnect with what beginner's mind means to us. So remember, we've been talking a lot about this during Ango, that when we're studying the slogans and when we're studying Lojong and when we're studying anything, our job, if you will, as Zen students is to make it come alive for us. Not just to regard it as oh, that's really good, or that's profound, or I like the thought of that, or maybe we write it down and kind of keep it on our computers for reminders. All good practices. But if we really look deeply inside our heart and the ways in which we are connecting to a particular teaching, to a particular activity, the ways in which our mind, our self-centered mind, our big ego mind is saying, aren't you tired of this yet? Don't you feel like you want to binge Netflix? Now, that's not saying we can't do those activities. Please don't misunderstand that. But this is the place that we can check in with ourselves. And we can say, is it out of laziness or is it out of self-care? Is it out of the need to rest? Or is it out of some pushback? Like, oh, I've read that. I've read the book 10 times. Do I really have to read it the 11th? Is it going to really open up more doors? I mean, we could really pick one book. And I tried to do this some months ago. So I thought, if I were to pick one book out of my library, what book would that be? That I would only read for the rest of my life. One book. I couldn't do it. I couldn't. I looked at all my books and I'm like, oh, my friends, I can't leave all of you and only have you. But all the teachings are contained in all the books. Might be a little different presentation, might use some different words, but all the teachings are contained in all of the books. That's the profundity of lineage and our ancestors. So in this part, Suzuki Roshi says, so the most difficult thing is always to keep your beginner's mind. There is no need to have a deep understanding of Zen. Even though you read much Zen literature, you must read each sentence with a fresh mind. You should not say, I know what Zen is, or I have attained enlightenment. This is also the real secret of the arts. Always be a beginner. Be very, very careful about this point. If you start to practice Zazen, you will begin to appreciate your beginner's mind. It is the secret of Zen practice. Here was my lofty goal for today that I can tell it's not going to happen. And I'm going to encourage you to do this because Dogen Zenji wrote this beautiful, as you know, Dogen Zenji is also considered proliferating Soto Zen Buddhism in the 13th century. And Dogen Zenji wrote the Shobogenzo, which is also the true nature of the Dharma Eye. Tanya, help me out. The treasury, thank you. The treasury of the true nature of the Dharma Eye. So he gave us 95 fascicles, chapters. And one of the most beautiful encouragements is in the appendix of Shobogenzo, of Kaz Tanahashi's version. That's the version that I've been reading. And the title in Japanese is Fukaza Zengi, recommending Zazen to all people. 2.5 pages. You can look it up. You can get the PDF for Fukaza Zengi. That's a lot to say. Recommending Zazen to all people. If you haven't read this, or if you haven't read it in a while, please look it up and please read it. If you have one of the books, the Shobogenzo, definitely Kaz Tanahashi's version, it's in the back. It's Appendix 1. It is phenomenal, and it's all about, it's working in tandem with what Suzuki Roshi is trying to help us understand, the mind of the beginner's mind, how to sit, how to concentrate, the right attitude. So 2.5 pages were coming from Dogen, from the translators of Dogen, that are helping us understand the essence of Zen practice, of Zazen. I really want to read this, but I know I can't. All right, I'll let you read it on your own time. That'll be something that you can develop some joy and wonder and awe. And I mean, I have a copy that I've printed out that sometimes when I'm just tired of sitting at the computer, and I'll read what Dogen says about recommending Zazen to all people, and I think, wow, I didn't recognize that point last time. This is different. This is something different that I can feel in my heart. So when Suzuki Roshi started the chapter on right practice, he said, basically, everything becomes your practice and your practice becomes everything. So sometimes we hear statements like that and we think, well, what does that mean? Great to ask that question. So we can drill down a little bit deeper. What does that mean? Everything becomes my practice, and my practice becomes everything. There's no separation, is there? There shouldn't be. We don't want there to be. Because that separation of self and other creates our problems, doesn't it? Creates the problems of unskillful speech, unskillful action. When we see that we are all intimately linked, no problem, right? So Dogen reminds us that the aspect of enlightenment is everyday activity. Sometimes we think it's something far-reaching, and if I do enough study, if I do enough practice, if I copy enough texts, if I recite enough mantras, at some point, I'm going to stumble into it. And Dogen and Suzuki Roshi are saying it's our everyday enlightened activities, those places of true beginner's mind, where we're not limiting the vastness, the clarity, the luminosity of our mind. We're touching original nature. We're touching true nature of self and seeing there is no separation. Even if it's for a nanosecond, we're placing some beautiful thought and feeling in our heart. So Dogen calls it everyday activity, continuous practice, moment by moment, letting go of artificial boundaries and limits. So we don't have to do anything special, but to be aware, but to use mindfulness, to use awareness as we walk from the zendo to our car, as we drive home. Everything becomes our practice, and our practice becomes everything. We can maybe even just think of the words at first. So the place of practice is right where you are. You don't have to go on pilgrimage. You can if you want, but you can use everything in your life. Every thought, every experience becomes our place of practice. Isn't that kind? You can even be laying down. Sometimes I feel lazy. And sometimes I lay down and I think, I need some rest. And then I can examine a little bit, like, what's sort of going on inside? Is it laziness? Is it actual need for rest? Is it something else? Is it boredom? What is it? So we can investigate it. We can know our mind and see the places that we have set up some artificial boundary or limit that's keeping us, that's preventing us from wholeheartedly embracing beginner's mind, embracing the possibilities. So Suzuki Roshi says, we're as responsible for our practice as we are for our life. Okay. So I'm going to do a little sort of quick synopsis, because Suzuki Roshi, the way that I've appreciated rereading this book is when it got to the first thing Suzuki Roshi starts out with is posture. And not so much about, okay, sit at this angle, sit at that angle, put your foot here, put your foot there, but the notion of the form of posture. He said, these forms are not the means of obtaining the right state of mind. To take this posture itself is to, sorry, that's my insulin pump going off at one of the most inopportune moments. Let me just check for a minute, folks. Sorry about that. Okay. I'm not going to collapse yet, so we're okay. So he said the position, the posture, expresses the oneness of duality, not two and not one. He says our body and mind are not two and not one. If you think your body and mind are two, that is wrong. If you think that they are one, that is also wrong. Our body and mind are both two and one. Each one of us is both dependent and independent. There is so much to unpack in this chapter, but he said the most important point is to own your own physical body. To check, because if our posture starts to deteriorate, we're a little tired and maybe we start to slump a little bit, or, chin goes down a little too far, eyes close, then we can become sleepy and drowsy, and we're not having an opportunity to develop awareness, maintain mindfulness. So he said, posture is most important thing. He said, it's not some good feeling. Enlightenment is not just some good feeling or some particular state of mind. The state of mind that exists when you sit in the right posture is itself enlightenment. If you cannot be satisfied with the state of mind you have in Zazen, it means your mind is still wandering about. Our body and mind should not be wobbling or wandering about. In this posture, there is no need to talk about the right state of mind. You already have it. This is the conclusion of Buddhism. And Dogen says the only way to break through subject and object is actual absorption in the moment. The only way to break through I, you, subject, object is actual absorption in the moment. And that moment's available to us every time we sit Zazen, every time we concentrate, every time we have an opportunity to just be aware, doing sesshin, doing ango, whatever practices we have. Okay, I think I'm going to stop so we can open up some discussion, because Suzuki Roshi goes into breathing, and what we call the self is just a swinging door on each inhale and exhale, that the I exists as just a swinging door when we inhale and when we exhale. But I want to have some time for discussion, but please, 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 if you haven't read this book, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, they're informal talks, and some of the ways that you can approach it is, I like to inspire myself that I'm sitting there when Suzuki Roshi first gave the talk. I mean, think of how precious that is, right? But we can do that when we read. It doesn't have to just be words on the paper. We can feel enlivened by what he's saying. We don't have to feel. It's not a race to finish the text. I recognize that in my excitement of teaching Dharma and working with Dharma, that I often go too fast, because it's so precious to me that I want to share all of these wonderful words. But I think it's also really, really important that we slow down. And if a sentence comes up in your mind, or a paragraph, or you think, I want to spend some time with that you spend some time with that. And to not feel that it's a rush or that it's a competition. It's your practice. We're just as responsible for our practice as we are for our life and for others that appear in our life. So I want to thank all of you for coming in today and sharing Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. It's precious to have Sangha here in person, online, seeing so many familiar, friendly, new, old faces. And I don't mean old in the way that we think of old, I mean familiar faces. But thank you all for your practice and for being here. So we have about 8 minutes before we have some opportunity to get some tasty treats. Any questions or comments? And those of you here, if we can pass around a microphone so the folks online can hear it.
Thank you, Myogetsu, for a beautiful talk, as always. Thank you. Inspiring. So many wonderful things about beginner's mind. That was such a great reminder. And I love what you said about being in pre-K still. Yeah, me too. Yeah, so thank you very much for your talk.
Thank you, Sensei.
Thank you, Myogetsu, for, am I on?
Yes.
For a wonderful talk, as always. I don't need to say that because everyone knows it. And I also appreciate the fact that you drew attention to the fact that your insulin thing went off. And I do think it's important as a teacher that you model self-care. And if you need to stop a talk because it comes on at an inopportune time, then you do that. And that's actually modeling something important about also, okay? So I am a little concerned that your thing went off. You know it better than I do, so I won't
Thank you,
need
Roshi.
to flog a dead horse, but please feel free anytime, at any time, to take care of yourself, and that includes everyone.
Thank
Yeah.
you, Roshi.
Wonderful talk. Thank you, Myogetsu.
Thank you.
Appreciate your voice and your art.
Thank you. Anyone else comment? Mike, you had your hand up. Susan, Mike, Susan.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. Thanks very much for all this. I wondered, as you were talking about being a beginner instead of an expert, how you can keep that in mind while you also are either teaching or, as Dogen said, recommending it to all people. It's tempting to be an expert when you want to tell somebody else about this.
Yes, yes. Well, that's a really good point, Mike. And I think for me, it's recognizing when I have some stirring of attachment to status or reputation. And when there's some ego involvement, that's the place that I recognize it's not humble and it's not opening my heart to just being a vessel. And I try to keep pointed in, let the Dharma flow through me. It's not my Dharma to give. It's what I can share. It's what I love. I love sharing, but it's the place that I recognize like a little bit of that stickiness of ego that's saying, oh, it's going really well. It's going really well. That I back off. And but it's a good question because, you know, those are categories, aren't they? Beginner, expert. They're labels. And sometimes I say mere label. Beginner, expert, I don't know. But great reminder. Thank you, Mike. Susan?
I think I'm here. Hi. I wrote down examining inside. You mentioned yourself taking a rest, lying down, and using that as a time to examine inside. I'm not sure what my question is, but examining inside is the basis of everything, pretty much. Noticing. But how do we do that without the intellect? I mean, examining inside with compassion, but without thinking, oh, I did this, or oh, I just did this, or oh, I just did that. I mean, how do we avoid putting our own stuff into that examination?
That is a really good question. I mean, one of the Lojong trainings and teachings, the encouragement is we're studying something very practical and conceptual, is examining doesn't mean analyzing. So maybe that's something for all of us to consider, like we can reflect, like what does it mean when we reflect, when we examine, or when we start to get into that place of intellectual analysis that can actually be a preventative from seeing what arises. I mean, I think at this stage, I don't pretend that I've, transcended that place of following thoughts and being able to say, oh, that was unskillful, or oh gosh, I think it feels clumsy and it feels awkward until it doesn't. But it's also how long we stay there. We can follow stories. We can maybe touch on a story or a narrative that we're saying, and sometimes we start to stick there rather than acknowledge it, breathe into it, go. I know Sensei often talks about the practice of Chogyam Trungpa, the touch and go. Like, while we're trying to figure all of this out, and maybe not figure it out, maybe experience it. Maybe figuring it out is the problem. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. But that's a really important question. Thank you for raising it. Appreciate it. We have a few minutes left. Anyone else with a question or comment? Yes, please.
Your talk was wonderful. I don't know if this is on. Is this on? Is it okay? Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Your talk was wonderful. Thank you so much. Obviously, I'm really new here. This is my second time. I'm really thankful to be here. And I'm just going to be excited to find the joy and to come every week.
Awesome.
But what really stuck with me is be grateful for everyone. Now, like you said, it's easy to be grateful for those that have been kind, but grateful for somebody that's been unkind, or grateful that's cut you off in traffic. To be mindful, to be grateful for everyone. That's a really big thing.
It is.
I'm really glad that you talked about that.
Thank you. It is a big thing. I mean, I completely echo what you're saying, that's sort of the practice potential. That's why Dogen is talking about continuous practice, everyday activities. We're not going to get it all right, and that's okay. What is to get what's right? It's just being mindful, being aware, so that we kind of see what we need to work with. You're right. It's easy to be grateful to people that show a kindness, but those that don't are still giving us something to work with if we pay attention. And if we're honest with ourselves to pay attention. A lot of times we want to go,
Myogetsu?
Yes.
Annie has her Zoom hand raised. You see that?
Oh, yes, that's right, Annie.
Hi.
Thank you,
Hi,
Roshi.
everybody. Thank you so much, Myogetsu. I really loved your talk. It was so rich with all kinds of wonderful human struggles. And I particularly enjoyed when the phone went off. It was like, okay, this is part of your practice too. Whatever happens, you just integrate it into the day.
Yeah.
And about I wanted to say something about the teachers. Yes, some teachers, like everybody I meet is my teacher, right? Some of them I don't like and some I like, but they're all my teachers.
Yes. Very nice point, Danny. Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, dear Sangha, we're at the 11 o'clock hour, and I want to be mindful of all of your time. So thank you again, and hope to see you again soon. Have a great day, folks.
Thank you. Thank you.